And we're back with the Diddy trial today. Not too much going on. I guess it's mainly just doing the jury selection today, and that is well underway. They've been asking questions like if the potential jury attendees, if they have either experienced a history of SA, or if somebody they know has. They've been questioning if whether or not they're familiar with some of the possible defendants, including like Michael Jordan and apparently Michael Myers, for whatever reason. We hadn't really heard much about him being involved in this case, but people like Kanye, people like Mike Myers, like I said, Michael Jordan, and then also they would have to have 8 weeks off of work. So I guess they're having a real struggle here trying to figure out and trying to find enough people that are eligible due to those parameters. I have the chat box set up, so I don't know why it's not going. 1 second, guys. Just going to have just chat going down the side. I'm sorry I didn't get on earlier. I had some things come up, and today got a little complicated, more complicated than it needed to be. So I do apologize, but there's not really been much going on. A lot of people kind of just been sitting and waiting for most of the day. So at this point, it's kind of like it's going to be starting, we're going to be getting more news about what's actually going on. Apparently, several of the plaintiffs, the accusers, may be in attendance to the trial. May not be this one, but for the upcoming trial proceedings. And it's still not really clear whether or not it's going to be publicized. It seems like so far they've kind of been just keeping things under wraps, and they're allowing people into the courtroom to take notes and to report on whatever they're witnessing during the proceedings. But as far as having actual media and news people in there with video cameras, it seems like it's not going to be a thing. They've been really kind of hush-hush about it, and all we've really seen coming out so far is just like artist renditions of what's going on in the courtroom versus any actual video footage. But we do have a couple news teams that are sitting outside on both sides of the courtroom there, waiting to see if, who's coming out, if any of the lawyers or plaintiffs are going to come and make any statements. So we're kind of just waiting it out to see what's going to happen. What's up, Denise? What's up, Rebecca? Susan, Braveheart, Butterfly? Welcome, guys. So yeah, it's kind of a complicated situation, being that, they are such high-profile individuals involved in the case. And, I think even trying to just find somebody that isn't aware of those people, let alone hasn't seen the Cassie video and isn't familiar with what's been going on, these last few weeks. And I guess even just since last year, since the raids and the arrests, it's going to be really complicated for them to find anybody that isn't familiar, at least familiar with some aspects of it. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see if they are actually going to be able to select the jury today, or if this is going to end up being a few-day event. I guess we won't know till later today, so we're just kind of waiting to see. But there is some news segments. I'll maybe play this news segment here of what was to be expected for today. How they're going to be going about the jury selection and so on and so forth.
York with jury selection. Now, Combs has pleaded not guilty to multiple charges, including sex trafficking, and has denied all civil allegations against him. Now, sources say Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, will be a central witness during the trial. Now, sources also tell CNN other witnesses expected to testify include his former sexual partners, a business associate, and a male sex worker. Joining me now to discuss is trial attorney and former senior assistant district attorney Otto Ekpo. Thank you for being here. Can you you just put into perspective how significant this case is?
This is a very, very significant case. I like to akin this to, this is the Gen Z's, I guess, version of the O.J. Simpson trial.
Wow.
I was in 5th grade whenever the O.J. verdict came out, and I remember my teacher stopping trial, or stopping the court, stopping our courtroom just for us to figure out, like, what's going on. We got to figure out what's happening with this verdict.
I'd say it's even bigger than that. You know, like the OJ trial was a pretty big deal, and everybody kind of knew what was going on with it, but not everybody really knew about OJ, you know, like he kind of became more notorious, I guess, or a little more gained that fame and notoriety because of the trial more so than anything. Just being a sports figure, you know, not everybody knows about sports, but as far as with the Diddy thing, like whether you like his music or not, everybody knows who Diddy is, and being such a, you know, he's been kind of on the A-list for decades, you know, like over 30 years. So, yeah, exactly, Rebecca. If, you know, how could you not be familiar with him when, you know, for the longest time, too, anytime you turn on the radio or, you know, it was all over the, you know, Much Music, MTV, whichever. Like, he was everywhere. Everybody knows who he is, whether they like his music or not, or whether they were any more familiar with him personally, like as a person or not. That's a whole other thing, but everybody knows who Diddy is, right? So I'm not sure how it's even going to be possible in a place like New York too, right? Because he's from there. It's going to be difficult. I really I wonder if they're going to have to fly in people from somewhere else, or like I just don't know how that's going to go, because it's like so much about it is not. It's kind of outside of the norm of how they would do a jury selection and how they would be able to find candidates for it. He needs the death penalty if he's guilty. I mean, I don't know what would be worse. That's almost letting him off a little bit easy. I think him having to spend the rest of his days in prison almost would be more of the better punishment, to be honest. I mean, for the life he's led for so long, and how much luxury and you know, just the ease of and comfort that he's had for so long, to be spending the rest of the time in prison, I think would be more of a punishment, a bit more of a punishment than most people that are kind of, you know, regular criminals that have been in and out of the prison system, and they're kind of just used to it, and they've got their, you know, there's different cliques and stuff going on in there. But for him, you know, he'd have to be under protection all the time. He'd probably be spending a lot of time in solitary. As they were saying, like before, during the other trials, that he was kind of already kind of like a target, that if somebody could get to him in prison, that it would be like a badge of honor to an extent, which, you know, not that I'm promoting any kind of violence or, you know, that's not the answer necessarily, but I think that having to stay in there for as long as possible, you know, and live out the rest of his days, I think might be more of the appropriate penalty in this case. You know, if they just give him the death penalty, then he's no longer with us. But it almost seems like the easier way out, you know. And I think some people in these cases, like, there's always the risk that they might end their own life to not have to face, you know, 10, 20, 30 years in prison. And as far as we know, he has waived the plea deal. Like, he didn't take the plea deal, so he's not going to have a lot of friends after this either, by the sounds of it, because I think that he's thinking he's going to be able to work with the FBI and give some names and get a lesser sentence, or maybe be able to gain some kind of immunity by being a witness, you know, as more so of a witness rather than being the defendant. Because obviously there was, you know, celebrities, politicians, you know, just all kinds of different public figures and influential people that maybe weren't so much a public figure, but very powerful in the grand scheme of things. So I think it's really hard to say how it's going to go, you know, at this point, and not taking the plea deal, what exactly that means for the case itself, and what that's going to mean for him, and if it's going to help him at all, or if it's all going to just kind of work against him. I don't know how they're going to find anyone who doesn't know about Diddy. My mother's 66 years old and only speaks Portuguese, and she knows all about the case, watching it on the Spanish news. Yeah, like, and it's all over. It's, like, worldwide, and exactly, people in every language and every culture, every religion, I'd say, you know, they're somewhat familiar with what's going on, you know, because this has been, like, the case of the century. You know, it's bigger. It's going to be bigger than the OJ trial. I almost guarantee it, for what it is and for how many different powerful and influential people are possibly going to be named, you know, for who's already been named. And then just with we're kind of being given some hints, I guess, as far as with what they're questioning these jurors about. Like, we've got Mike Myers coming up, which his name hasn't been brought up in this at all so far that we know of, you know. So, like, nothing's been reported or announced to do with him, but it just shows how far-reaching this situation may be and how many different celebrities and you know, beloved actors and actresses and musicians and so on and so forth, you know, that might actually be a part of this that we hadn't even thought of, you know. I would have never guessed Mike Myers, but because he's like a comedian, and he did, if you guys remember, Austin Powers. So it just seems like not really the crowd that he'd be running with, you know what I mean? Like, as far as, you know, hip hop and rap, it just doesn't really seem like it you know, with Kevin Hart, it kind of makes sense with that kind of comedian being around, and like certain ones that have, you know, they're all kind of friends, right? You got like that group, but Mike Myers kind of seems like he'd stand out like a sore thumb to an extent. So it really makes you wonder where they're going with that, you know.
What's different in this particular case than the O.J. Simpson trials, that this is not going to be live streamed.
Yeah.
You know, in federal court, you can't live stream any type of court at all. You can't live stream any trials. And so your audience is really going to have to focus on how CNN is kind of letting them know how the trial is progressing. But it's extremely significant. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's going to come down to the courtroom sketches, to
Absolutely.
what you hear from maybe witnesses choose to speak afterwards. We'll see. Look, as a prosecutor, when you approach a high profile case like this, how is preparation different from one that might be a little bit more out of the spotlight?
They have to prepare because they cannot make any mistakes.
Yeah.
This elite all-women prosecution team, they've got to make sure that all their ducks in a row. This is either a make your career type of case, or this is a break your career type of case. So they're going to be prepared. I think they've been working on this case for at least a year now. They are prepared with their evidence. They're prepared with their witnesses. They've probably spoken to their witnesses at least 2 to 3 times to make sure that every I is dotted and every T has been crossed.
And, you know, you talked about the prosecution team, high-profile case, high-profile defendant,
Right.
High-profile defense attorneys, too, with resumes that include defending Martin Shkreli, you know, the Pharma Bro,
Yeah.
Young Thug, and more. On the defense side of things, does that experience actually make a difference in a case like this? And if so, how?
I think it does.
Yeah.
What the defense has done recently is bringing in a pinch hitter by the name of Brian Steele. You just mentioned the Young Thug trial. He was the lead defense attorney there. What the defense is trying to do is throw wrenches in anything that the prosecution's going to lay out. Any evidence they have, they want to try and misconstrue, throw out red herrings, throw out red flags, so the jurors aren't actually focused on the real evidence. And so,
Which they've kind of already been doing that, like just in the news and with different distractions and things happening. It kind of just seems like they don't want people focusing on certain aspects of this case, you know, and this is why I wanted to do that. The live coverage recap and focusing on reminding people like that there are a lot of minors, alleged minors who are alleged victims in this case, and reminding people what this is really about, and not let them get so lost in the sauce and the certain details. You know, like they kind of sensationalized the whole thing about the 1,000 bottles of baby oil, you know, and made a big deal of it, but didn't really speak on so much about why that much baby oil would be there and what its significance was and why the FBI would seize it, right? Like, there's certain details and certain aspects that they're kind of keeping under wraps on purpose, right? And that's weird, D-Day. I don't know why that would be happening like that. It must be something to do with your app, or I don't know if you're on mobile or what you're doing, but that's kind of strange that it's got your words going backwards. We see it fine on this side, so I don't know what's going on your end. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting because, like, if he wasn't already in some kind of danger with people, you know, wasn't already a target in there, if he's going to start ratting people out, you know, we know how well that's received in the prison system. You know, people don't take too kindly to that. So it's gonna be interesting to see, I guess, how they're gonna maneuver around that too, or how that's gonna be handled. Like if he is just gonna end up being in solitary, or what's gonna happen. Because I guess for now, he's waiting trial, but you know, once it comes down the line, and if he ends up in prison, and they end up just having him, you know, absorbed into the general pop, which maybe they won't because of the situation, but it's really hard to say. You know, because it sounds like they kind of want to throw the book at him and really make a point of it, make an example of it, like that you can't be doing this stuff anymore. You know, you got away with it for 30 some odd years, but none of it was okay, and we're not doing this anymore. You know, we're not going to allow this kind of thing anymore. Yeah, and the Robin Williams thing, like his name came up, and you know, with what happened to him near the end and what was going on, apparently with his mental health and stuff. I'm wondering if they kind of were bringing him down there and whatever, and then once he saw enough that, I want to believe that he didn't really want to be a part of it, you know, that he was trying to get away from it, and that it just didn't end well for him, you know, but he's been in the industry for such a long time. So it really makes you wonder. It really makes you wonder what kind of involvement he would have had. But I guess same with, you know, like, because Ali did mention other comedians like Kathy Griffin and different comedians too, but didn't mention Mike Myers, so I was kind of surprised to hear that they were asking the jury about if they were familiar with him or not. And maybe they're just throwing out different names just to, like, kind of distract and deflect too, so it's not giving too much information, but just kind of gauging people's interest or knowledge on certain public figures.
So their experience is actually very, very important. And so if they can get one juror to kind of look the other way and not look at this case the way the prosecution wants it to be, that's very beneficial for the defense's side.
And, you know, obviously the nature of this case is a very sensitive one, especially for the alleged victims here as well. And not all of the witnesses coming forward have chosen to use their names as part of their testimony. But Cassie Ventura, Diddy's former girlfriend, is choosing to testify under her own name. What is the significance of that, I guess, from a prosecutorial standpoint, but also just in general? What is the significance of that?
She's ready to have her day in court.
Yeah.
She's ready to let everybody know, not just Diddy, but to let the world know what happened to her. When you are uncloaking that veil and when you are actually presenting your true self in front of jurors, in front of the world, it means that you mean business. And that's great for the prosecution.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting too if she's going to be a witness, because I think that he thought, like, because it settled really quickly, like, when, especially after the video came out, and then he did that apology video, and I think he thought settling it quickly would just kind of make it go away, but I guess depending on what the parameters of the settlement were, whether or not she was allowed to speak about it publicly is one thing, but if she's subpoenaed by a federal court to come and be a witness and give a statement in this situation, you know, like, there's nothing anybody can do about that. I feel like that kind of that overrides any kind of agreement to not speak to the public about it after the settlement. You know, I think that either way, she's going to have to tell her side of the story. You know, and that's going to be a big nail in his coffin, 100%. And then with everything we know, like with what happened with Kim Porter, and just, you know, we do see that there's a pretty clear pattern with what was going on from, you know, all the different alleged victim statements and testimonies, you know. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to come up with a jury that's going to, you know, make sure that it's a fair trial on one hand, but then, yeah, be focusing on all the right details and, you know, paying attention to the brass tacks of it all, I guess you could say, like the meat and potatoes of it, and not get distracted by different scandalous details. You know, like there's going to be some things that people might get a little lost in the sauce on that. Like I said about the baby oil thing, like people were so like, what the heck, like 1,000 bottles of baby oil, what kind of freak out party, you know, like, and just thinking about it as if it were lubricant, right? But obviously there was a lot more to that, and I guess they're going to have an expert physician that's going to come and speak about GHB and different substances that were used in different circumstances here. So that's going to give people a lot more insight about that and put things more into perspective. But depending on how it's presented and depending on, again, the jury's level of understanding of the world, of the hip-hop world and what goes on at these parties and stuff. Because, I mean, if you've got jury members that don't have any clue about who these people are and they're not as up with the current, they might not really be understanding the significance of some of the evidence and the statements being made, and how it all kind of interconnects. And obviously it's going to be a pretty complicated case too. So, and if they're looking for 8 weeks for this jury, but I'm wondering if it's going to end up being longer than that even, like I think there's so many moving parts, so many different layers that it'd be difficult to think that it could actually be able to go through all of it within a couple months, like I feel like there's going to be a whole summer event.
When you have a victim, when you have a survivor that's decided, I'm actually going to come out here and I'm going to tell you my name, it's because I'm ready for whatever the defense is going to show.
Yeah.
So.
Oto Ekpo, really appreciate you coming in. Thanks for the time and perspective.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
The criminal trial for Sean Diddy Combs is set to begin Monday in New York. And while we don't know the names of everyone who will be called to testify, sources tell CNN former sexual partners of Combs are among them. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges, including sex trafficking, and has denied all civil allegations against him. CNN's Elizabeth Wagmeister has more.
We are getting some new details on the criminal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, which is set to begin on Monday with jury selection. Now, while the witness list has not been made public by the court, sources have given me an indication of some of the individuals that we may see take the stand during this trial. Cassie Ventura, who is the ex-girlfriend of Sean Combs and the musician, she is going to be the star witness in this case. Now, Cassie Ventura is the only alleged victim who has decided to testify under her real name, but the judge has allowed other alleged victims to testify under pseudonym so that their identity will be protected.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that she's part of it, and like when that video leaked and everything started coming down the line, like her identity was already known to the press and to the public, right? So I guess what difference does it make now whether or not her identity's hidden? It's already out there, right? And we know that she was present for a lot of different parties throughout, for a long time. Like actually, when I was looking into and doing the Tila Tequila video, both her and Kim Porter were at that 4th of July white party in 2009. And then obviously there was like a good 10, 15 years or so, I believe, that Cassie was kind of in the realm and in that sphere, so I can understand and see why she would be such a valuable asset to the case, and that she would have seen a lot of stuff, and she's probably just been waiting for this moment for a long time. I think with the way that the coercion and manipulation and control and the fear tactics used, I think for a lot of people it's probably such a huge relief that things are finally coming out, and people are getting their day in court, and the truth's going to finally come out, because I think so many people have wanted it to be known for so long, and including Allie Carter's been speaking it even since before the raids and the arrest and all of that, and there's been people since before that, like Tila was speaking out about it a long time ago, and Kanye off and on has been trying to say some stuff, and I think for a while he was kind of in the thick of it. And, I don't think he's innocent by any means. I think there's probably enough things that, whether he was under the influence or coerced or whatever by Diddy into doing certain things, he was still an adult and making the choices. Like, he was another power player versus some of these, like a lot of these victims who are looking for a career in music, or who were hired to work at the parties, or, they were little people, I guess you could say, when they, at the Academy Awards or whatever, they say they'd like to thank the little people or whatever. And not that anyone should be measured one way or the other, but when you look at it from that power dynamic aspect of Kanye kind of being his own thing and already having enough success of his own, and, got a little more freedom that way, I suppose. So anything that he was participating in, he's definitely a little more of a willing participant versus people that, were being forced to chase the carrot, or had been, you know, manipulated in some other way due to that power dynamic.
In addition to Cassie Ventura, the government has 3 other key witnesses. So a total of 4 key witnesses who will take the stand to discuss their allegations against Sean Combs. Now, of course, there will also be corroborating witnesses who take the stand either to corroborate some of those other key witnesses or to add some relevant information. I'm hearing that one of those supporting witnesses will be a friend of Cassie Ventura's. I am hearing that another one of those witnesses will be a male sex worker, and I hear from a source that it's possible that additional male sex workers may also take the stand. Now, at the center of the government's case in the indictment, they said are these so-called freak-offs, which the government has described essentially as drug-fueled sex parties where Combs and others allegedly forced women into sex acts, oftentimes with male sex workers. So that could possibly give some indication of the testimony that we may hear from that sex worker.
Well, and it wasn't just like drug-fueled parties like that. It was like they were basically like directing for the videos, you know, like he was creating circumstances and putting certain people together and having certain people under the influence that may or may not have been a request from some other power player that wanted to obtain the videos. You know, like there might be something like so much more going on here than what anybody really realizes. Like it wasn't just celebrities getting freaky. You know, there were tapes, there were hidden cameras, there was so much more going on. And I think probably one of those witnesses, one of the main witnesses is going to be that what was his name, the Rodney Jones guy that had been commissioned to help not only with the producing of the one album, but was told to record everything, to have video and recordings of everything, like 'cause they wanted to make like a documentary about it or something. And all of that can be turned in as evidence at this point, right? And then on top of whatever was handed over that Kim Porter had allegedly sent around before, like kind of she had, I guess, suspected something was going to happen, that she was in danger. So she had been, I guess, using probably like Google Drive or something like that and loading up videos and typing out like her diary, her memoir, as she went. And it was kind of like just like a diary entries. And then that's why that book that came out was a little bit kind of haphazard. It wasn't professional by any means, but it was, you know, her train of thought on any given situation, on any given day. So any of the footage that was collected there, plus whatever Rodney Jones is bringing to the court, you know, so there's going to be a lot of like the biggest witness in this case is going to be the video camera, if we're being real, you know what I mean? And any audio and anything else that supports what a lot of these people are saying, because I guess, yeah, it's one thing to have the corroborating of different individuals and what they saw, what they heard, so on and so forth, but to have the video footage, you know, and you know, it's been speculated that most of what they were able to gather from his home, like that he might have had a heads up, and then most of what they were gathering from the home was like mainly just like security footage that had nothing on it, and it was like 90 terabytes of just whatever footage of around the home, and just like I said, like security camera footage. But if some of those tapes were able to be leaked and sent around, and they have now been submitted, you know, you can't really escape from that. And you know, one of the arguments might be that it's AI or it's this or it's that or something else, you know, and depending on the source, you know, if it had been leaked out before and then floated around between a few different parties, like they might want to try to claim that it was doctored in some way, or that there's some other, like I said, an AI generation. But they do have like digital forensic teams that can decode and see if something's been edited that way. Same as with pictures, you can tell if they've been photoshopped or not. You know, there is a way to know for sure. Like already they're trying to say that with the Cassie video that it had been doctored and it had been altered to make it look worse than it was. But already I know that it came out, it was public, and then Diddy had acknowledged it and gave an apology for it. So he kind of already shot himself in the foot for that, to try to say that it wasn't real or that it's been altered, because that could have been what he would have said immediately, like apologizing for the situation and his part in it, but then mention like that doesn't, I don't think that's how it went. I think they sped it up to make it look worse, or you know what I mean? Like during that public statement he was making about it, you'd think he would have mentioned it, right? If he didn't think it was real, right? But he was speaking on it as if it was a very real thing, and like that he remembered it, he was there for it. So he kind of legitimized it in giving that apology and statement about it when it came out, So obviously they're going to do whatever they can to try to discredit or discount some of the evidence and some of the witnesses in the case, but seems to me like they're, it's all pretty stacked against him. And if more and more people are coming forward, more and more lawsuits have been filed, even up into these recent last few days. What was it, a few days ago that there were more lawsuits entered in, and it kind of worked against him, because at first he was trying to rush it to trial, because he was figuring, I guess, that there was so much evidence and so much stuff to go through that there wouldn't be enough time, that they'd kind of get all caught up with themselves, and it'd be too rushed to be able to have enough proper evidence against him. So he wanted to rush the trial originally, and then at one point one of his attorneys quit, because I guess things were getting real serious, and they started just realizing how much evidence and how much is really going on and what was really going on. I believe once they started talking about the potential of deceased people being involved in some of these arrangements, I guess you could say. It was kind of a rumor. That I guess there's no confirmation of that, and some people were confusing whether it was necromancy or necrophilia. Like, I don't know if we're even allowed to say that, but just so that we're clear here what I'm trying to say. And it was around that time that the one attorney had quit, so that definitely slowed down the progress of his defense. And there's just been more and more coming out since, and more of these witness statements are already corroborated. You know what I mean? Like, there's already enough public information, and just when you look at the pictures from some of the parties, like, we know who was there, we know who was in attendance, and then it's just a matter of who stayed for the after party, and who knew what was going on and didn't say anything, who was a participant, and or whether they were actually participating or not, but if they saw what was going on and didn't say anything, in a way that does kind of give it is a bit of a form of guilt to an extent. So it's just going to be interesting to see how they're able to navigate through this, because I think like everything's pretty stacked against him at this point, and trying to rush it to trial is, if anything, has just made it worse for him, because as more and more is coming out against him, he's kind of now scrambling to work on his defense, versus the prosecutor is scrambling to find enough evidence. I think he was hoping that they were going to be able to put enough fear and turn people around on it enough, like we know that they were sending those private investigators around to try to skew the narrative with certain creators that were covering it, that were approached and then had reported on that. So it's like all these things they used to be able to do, it's not the same anymore. Like, people aren't so scared and keeping stuff secret anymore. They're like, yeah, there's these private investigators here questioning me about this, that, and the other thing, and then posting that online. Like, there's a lot more independent journalism happening nowadays, and I think people are more apt to want to fight for the justice, like now, with realizing how much has really been going on the last few decades. What was happening behind the scenes to people that, we grew up watching and appreciating, or listening to, all the things that now we can kind of suspect were happening to them. Like, this is for all of us, we're all in this and want to see justice at this point, and just for the fact that we watched so many young celebrities, young performers, their lives spiral out of control, and for so long they've blamed that person or tried to say that, just whatever, demonizing and punishing people for the results of their trauma rather than looking at the root cause of trauma, and we've come a long way from that. We have a lot more of an understanding, we've put more of the dots together, so I don't think people want to let this slide, where before I think there was, it was a little easier for public figures and for powerful people to get away with this kind of thing. over the years, but like the time's up. You know, we're all done. We're all over it. We're not doing this anymore.
Now, this trial is anticipated to run up to 2 months. Sean Combs faces 5 different charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And remember, Combs is also facing more than 60 civil suits. Those civil suits are completely separate from this criminal case, but I do hear that many of the civil accusers who have already come forward with civil claims against Combs will be testifying in this trial. Back to you.
All right, Elizabeth Wagmeister, thank you so much. Joining me right now to talk more about all of this, CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson. Joey, great to see you.
Good to see you, Frederica.
So how might this witness testimony potentially impact the overall criminal case?
Yeah, it will certainly be huge. I mean, to be clear, this is going to be a very salacious trial if the indictment has anything to do with it, and it does, right? An indictment is merely an accusation which charges a code of conduct. And here, the indictment lays out very clearly what Mr. Combs was using his business enterprise for a number of years. And what was that? According to prosecutors, it was ultimately to really allow him to exploit his celebrity status and his fact that he was the head of this organization to gratify his sexual needs, according to prosecutors. And he did it by having those freak-off parties where there would be people who were transported across state lines, either coerced to do it or coercion or use of fraud, or engaging in prostitution to do it. And you'll hear about guns, you'll hear about drugs, you'll hear about payments of various types that were made to people. You hear about rent payments, the withholding of payments, really orchestrating their careers and using coercion in various other forms. And so that'll be the narrative of the prosecution. And so to end to your question, the witnesses who testify as to that narrative will be very compelling. The reality from the defense will be whether they're credible and whether their testimony should carry the day. As we look there, his ex-girlfriend, Cassie, we know there was a civil lawsuit settled with them, and they apparently went out for quite some time, and there are 4 witnesses who have these other allegations. So the issue, Frederica, will be is with these witnesses, will they have enough and do enough to establish what the prosecution's theory is, and that is that he should be convicted of these various crimes.
Well, and there's so much more to it than that, even. Like, there's so many different layers to it that, like, I really hope that it doesn't end up just getting distracted in the little details that way of, like, okay, yeah, there was the transportation, there was basically human trade and exploitation, but then for what? For who, right? Like, there's so much more to that, and then who was collecting the tapes? Like, who was paying for the tapes? You know, there was so much more going on there, and I really do wonder if they've ended up doing any investigation into his preparatory schools. He has like 3 different schools that he'd open up in poor areas and for disadvantaged youths. That it was kind of like a lottery system, and they would cover their schooling and have them going to these different schools, and then taking them to certain camps for 6 to 8 weeks in the summertime and stuff like that. Like, I feel like there's so much more here, but whether or not it's going to be brought to trial in this, or if it's, you know, going to be part of those other lawsuits that are coming down the line. Now they're saying there's 60 at the moment, but we do know that Busby was saying that there was like early on there was like 120 cases that they were looking to file. So who's to say how many more are going to be coming down the line? And obviously it is complicated, and they are going to be trying to go backwards and forwards and see what connects with what. Because the more of these, the people doing the lawsuits, the plaintiffs, the more of them they can have kind of going together in a way that they're kind of corroborating one another, you know, and for certain events, having them kind of going together in groups would be my guess of how they're being filed. But 60 is still a ton. It's still a ton, and depending on what events and what years, and, you know, like we know with what Ali was saying had happened, that she had witnessed at that Playboy Mansion party, and with Diddy and some of his associates, you know, there's so many more venues, there's so many more people involved than, you know, and some people, there's not going to be justice because they're just no longer with us, you know what I mean? But I think this was so much more of an open secret, and there was so much more going on than what we're being led to believe at the moment, you know. And I guess they just really need to be sure, like he was saying, to cross the T's and dot the I's and so on and so forth, to really make sure that they've got everything that they need together to address each and every event and all who were involved, you know. Because it is just so much bigger. It's so much bigger than what it's sounding like to begin with, you know. Like, I think there's going to be so much more coming down the line, and you know, there's the other people involved too, like his investors and the people that were working for him, and again, all the different venues, the hotels, and just places that were kind of complicit and turned a blind eye too, you know. Like, I really hope they go all the way with this, because it's not just you know, at his parties, and it wasn't just human trade, and it wasn't just, you know what I mean, like there was so much more going on.
And that Cassie Ventura will use her own name as she's appearing as the star witness. Her testimony will also accompany the video of her being pursued by the Combs that so many have seen already well before this trial. So how will the defense try to combat that? I know you had mentioned already the defense will go after credibility, but how else and what else might we see from the defense?
I think they're going to come out swinging. I think this is about coercion versus consent, and the fact that a person might lead a lifestyle that other people don't find satisfactory or that may believe is unsavory is not the issue. The issue is not how you live your life. The issue is not the amount of sexual partners you have or what you do for your sexual gratification with respect to parties. The issue is whether there was a violation of law, and there will be the defense hammering away on the notion that, listen, and it'll start even before that, Federica, I should say, with jury selection, in order to test the notion of whether people are there to evaluate how people should live their sex lives or whether they're there to evaluate criminality. And so the defense will say, ignore the shiny objects, ignore the issues about drug abuse, et cetera, ignore the fact that you have a person here who might be deeply flawed morally. Did he commit a crime? Was there coercion to the extent that the prosecution will say we're engaged in, or were these consensual relationships run amok by people who have hidden agendas, people who mean him harm, and people who are otherwise there to testify because he's a bad actor and a bad person? That's not the issue. Is he a criminal? So there'll be
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too, is like a lot of people, the morals and values, like they might get like lost in that versus the overall of what's going on, you know, like the bigger picture of it. Like, it's going to be so hard to keep people focused on that part of it. And yeah, exactly, Veronica. They've had us focusing on Diddy for all this time, and then meanwhile we've got one of the star witnesses in the Epstein case no longer with us. And it does seem like there are some overlaps. I was reading into that Tisci guy, the Ricardo Tisci, and his connections with Kanye. And then what was going on with that. But it does seem like there's some overlap there between the Epstein situation and this situation, some of the same names coming up. And we do know that Epstein had kind of embroiled himself into the fashion and modeling industries in order to, like, kind of as a front, in order to procure more individuals for his criminal enterprise, you know. And so it seems kind of like that's sort of the way Diddy was going about it, but with the music industry, you know, and just different things to do with the music industry, you know, dancers and different creatives getting sucked into it with promises of a career, you know, and then come to find out they're just being used as an ornament, basically, or as an object, as a sexual object, or as a toy, even to an extent. So there really is so much more going on, and yeah, I guess whether or not having a freak off on its own, and if it were among consenting adults, like, that's not necessarily illegal, and that's not necessarily a crime. And, you know, I've said it enough times, like, it doesn't really matter to me what consenting adults want to do. Like, the one line I've used a few times is, like, I don't care if Diddy was wearing Jay-Z's ass as a hat, kind of thing, you know? Like, they can be doing whatever the heck they want. behind closed doors and amongst consenting adults. But it seems like a lot of people were not only just not consenting because of, they were plied with various substances and alcohol, or laced alcohol, like the spiked drinks, that it wasn't what they thought they were drinking, and next thing, so not only were a lot of these adults not consenting, but we have found that a lot of these lawsuits are involving minors, with one as young as 9 years old having filed a lawsuit with Busby's. So I guess we'll kind of wait and see. This is just the preliminary stages. It's such an early on. We really don't have that much information just yet, and it's still going to take some time, I'd say, for everybody to get their ducks in a row for how complex it is and how many different people were involved. But I think it's going to be really hard for him to prove otherwise at this point, with the different, like, the amount of lawsuits coming down, the amount of video footage, the different witnesses and whistleblowers, Cassie herself coming forward and speaking as a star witness, because she did witness a lot over the years. And hopefully they're protected. Hopefully these different people are being protected and they're in a safe space throughout this, because I think as things start heating up, it's going to be similar to this Virginia situation, and it may not be this year, but these things can drag on for years. Like the Epstein situation was kind of still an ongoing thing in some ways. There's still names that were never mentioned. There's still a whole list of people that it's not only just that they had shown up on the flight logs and in the black book, but had been mentioned by various victims and witnesses and so on, and like that's still, they're kind of keeping that under wraps. So I'm wondering if it's going to be more like that, and they're going to still like be keeping it quiet, and it's going to be an ongoing thing, or if we're going to actually be able to see some real justice here.
Swinging on both sides, it'll be a lot of salacious evidence and information. And it's not only the witnesses, Frederica, there's going to be certainly electronic evidence. I think the jury's going to see an awful lot as they sit there visually, in terms of what he was doing, in terms of what these parties were all about, and in terms of any physical type of abuse that he engaged in. You mentioned one of them, and that's that surveillance where you see him and Cassie, him doing not such nice things to her.
All right. Joey Jackson, thank you so much.
Old Guard, is that yeah, Old Guard. Yeah, it's a group of veterans, professionals.
Oh, as in my sister. They top 40 like attorney of Los Angeles. Oh, good. You know Norma Jean Williams with Wilshire Boulevard? Williams and Associates.
The name sounds...
Married to Goldstein, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory rocket scientist. Bruce.
Oh, I know Tyson.
Tyson?
Yeah.
I know
Tyson.
Tyson, Sicily?
Yeah, no, not Sicily.
About some of their experience, about some of the names on their case, anything else that stood out?
Well, Andy, I'm glad you brought that.
While Trump has been for big
What? To a sexual degree. Proposed as the Diddy federal trial begins in the Big Apple. You can see there talking about a sobering admission about his emotions as jury selection in this bombshell New York City sex trafficking trial kicks off. We're going to be joined right now on the ground outside of the courthouse as day one finalized. Of course, jury selection underway. Opening statements next week by Fox 5 New York's Lisa Evers. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. What can you tell us about what transpired inside the courtroom today?
As you can imagine, here at federal court in Lower Manhattan, this was day one of the trial, the start of jury selection, and you can't overstate how much is on the line for Sean Diddy Combs in this federal sex trafficking and racketeering case. A win means he walks out of MDC, that federal jail he's been in now for nearly 8.5 months, a free man. A loss or a conviction means he could end up spending the rest of his life behind bars. Now, inside court today, several dozen potential jurors jurors came through to be questioned by Judge Arun Subramanian. Each one being considered was part of an original group of about 700 jurors who filled out pre-screening questionnaires last week. Now, Combs was in court. This is what everybody's asking. He was there with this huge legal team of over 7 people, as well as consultants, jury consultants. And instead of wearing the tan jail uniform that he's been wearing throughout the preceding court hearings where he's attended them here, he was wearing the uniform, the kind of trial uniform that the judge is allowing him to have, a white shirt, a black sweater, and black pants. He was wearing glasses, which he's been wearing glasses. His hair is mostly all gray now, had a gray goatee, was paying very close attention to the answers that those jurors were given. Now, by the end of today's session, more than half a dozen people were disqualified for various reasons, including experience with sexual harassment or abuse, prior knowledge of the case that they said that they told the court would interfere with their ability to judge it fairly, and also contacts with law enforcement or members of their family or close circle that was in law enforcement. Now, by the end of the day,
that's insane, though. Holy, out of 700 people they had to go through so far, and then they kind of narrowed it down, and then already they had to dismiss a bunch because it conflicted in some way. It's going to be so difficult. I really am going to, I don't know. I can't see how it'd be possible to get a full jury of people that have not either been a victim of or know somebody that's been a victim of some kind of SA or harassment, that hasn't had some kind of prior knowledge of the case and with the Cassie thing, that doesn't, have some kind of bias in this. It's going to be so freaking complicated. Pardon my language, but I don't know how it's even going to be possible. Whoever is in charge of that and putting it together and trying to figure out this jury situation, all the power to them, because this is it's like a near impossible feat, Yeah, and everybody's was blaming Diddy. Yeah, exactly. But there were so many other people involved, and even with the Jaguar Wright situation, where she's been kind of vocal and was sort of speaking out for victims for a bit there, and kind of seemed like she had her heart in the right place for a while. But then we kind of seen her out there attacking different victims and spreading lies and running a smear campaign, and then come to find out she is also being named in certain lawsuits. So it's you really don't know with some of the people in this that may have been more of an accomplice to the situation and encouraging. She had been mentioned in the one, there's a few different things going on with her, but the one lawsuit with one of the Diddy victims had said that she had alleged that Jagged participated and was encouraging an assault with a remote control on one of the victims. So, we really got to keep our eyes wide open here and really be paying close attention on all sides, and I'm wondering if the jurors that they end up with, if they don't know about all of this and they don't have any experience in, or haven't had their own personal experience or know somebody that has with any kind of SA, or they're not familiar with these people, I'm struggling to think that they might even be able to fully understand the gravity of it all, and how everything interconnects.
There were 19 of these prospective jurors who will go on to the next phase of selection at the end of the week, but a lot on the line here, and Combs was paying extremely close attention to what was being said, talking with his attorneys, looking at a laptop, and even taking notes in a spiral notebook that he had there with him at the defense table. But Andy, a lot more to come, and a lot of experts, legal experts, are saying that about half of this case depends on this jury selection and the qualities of these jurors and their ability, as the judge says, to bring attention to the evidence and focus on the evidence that's presented in court and the testimony, and not to what they may have seen already in any of those many documentaries about Diddy that have appeared in recent months. Andy?
Yeah, it's going to be a Herculean effort to fill this jury with, like you mentioned, those 12 individuals, and it's so very interesting. Of course, he excused himself for a bathroom break some 90 minutes in, just as he was himself nervous the accused, Sean Diddy Combs. And I want to ask you about this jury because there is going to be a questionnaire prior to this that they fill out that the defense and prosecution will be able to ask them some questions. Were there any interesting questions that they asked of some of the potential jurors about some of their experience, about some of the names on their case? Anything else that stood out?
Well, Andy, I'm glad you brought that up because there was one question that kept coming up with a lot of people, and which was for everyone. But this was this question about whether or not you're capable of seeing video and being comfortable with video that shows graphic sex, sex acts, the graphic violence. If you can comfortably watch that, and some of the prospective jurors said, quite frankly, they can't. And also, would you be comfortable talking about sexual matters with the other prospective jurors as this goes into deliberations? So that's an indication of what they're expecting to see during this trial. And
Which, like, I'm sorry, but what kind of people are they getting then, though, if they are okay with seeing that? Like, nobody's going to be okay with it. Everybody's going to be uncomfortable. Then there's certain things you can't unsee, and it's the kind of stuff that'll stick out in your mind for probably the rest of your life. By the sounds of some of the things that were going on, and based on, some of the witness and whistleblower statements so far, what they've alleged, I don't think anybody could be comfortable seeing it. Like, that's such a silly thing, really. Like, in a way, like, I get what they mean. Like, are you aware of what you're going to have to see, and are you going to be okay with that? Like, are you going to be able to mentally handle it, and being able to handle it, and whether in that moment. And how it's going to affect you later on is a whole different thing. A lot of people might think that they can handle it and it'd be okay. Like, okay, yeah. But they might not even know really what they're getting into. Because if they don't really know the details of the case and they don't really know what's been going on, how could they know for sure of what they're going to be okay or not okay with? And if they're doing it like, saying it in that way, like with certain sexual violence and whatever, what they might be expecting to see and what they're actually going to see might be two different things also. Because if these people are, again, like I said, not as up with the current, and since we know that some people have been mentioning or alleging that it wasn't just adults, that there may have been children and animals involved in some of these films, you might be thinking and expecting one thing, but then that could scar you for life. I think like with some of these cases, man, there's, like I said, there's just some stuff you can't unsee, and I'm hoping. Or wondering, I guess, but I'm hoping that there's going to be some kind of, mental health team that's going to be able to be there to support these jurors. Because even if they think they're going to be able to handle it and they're aware of it and they're it's going to be okay and they're going ahead as a juror, it might be more than they realize. They might be biting off more than they can chew for the long term. And in that moment, it might not be affecting them. But then that's the kind of thing that could be haunting your nightmares. And you could be having flashbacks of that, like as a, that's a certain things that'll imprint on you that you can't unsee it. You can't undo that, right? And a lot of the noise online is meant to confuse and manipulate public opinion in such ways where these criminals and co-conspirators can try to get away with their crimes or hide their true involvement. Yeah, exactly, Sentinel. Like, just, sowing seeds of doubt and disinformation. With having, like, we know that those private investigators were going around and encouraging creators to change the narrative. Like, if somebody's paying you to talk about this, we'll pay you more to talk about something else or to change the story, So who knows how many people have been paid off at this point to either remain silent or to change the story or to just be out there spreading disinformation. Like, who's to say that some of these people that are now looking like they're on the wrong side of things, like that they weren't put there on purpose to get everybody's attention over here looking at this and talking about this and whatever, like with the Jag situation and then all the drama and all the stuff that came along with that, like it's all a distraction, but yeah, exactly, like there's nothing they're comfortable with, but they need to be and they have to stay strong to be able to put them away. Exactly, Mary. It needs to be done. We do need some people that are going to be able to serve as the jury on one hand, but I'm just really concerned for what they might end up seeing from what we have come to understand as being part of it, I just really hope they'll have that support, if nothing else, if I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go for them. And like, that's not like they can get the support from their family or anybody else, right? Because they get sequestered when they're doing the jury duty thing. So they're not allowed to really have outside contact, or, you know, the people that would be able to support them through it normally in their own life, like, they're not going to have access to that. So it's really, really hard to say what it's going to do, you know, like, because obviously it's really traumatic just for the people that had to suffer through it and that were victims of it. But to what extent are we going to be re-victimizing people, you know, in the courtroom and the jurors? Like, it's almost like recycling trauma and expanding it in a way, but it's tough because they do need to see and understand what they're talking about when they're dealing with, right? So it's such a double-edged sword. And yeah, you never know. There might be attempts to tamper with the witnesses and the victims and the jury, because they already have been. It already seems like that's what's been going on, is kind of tampering in some ways or another. And there was some victims that had said that they'd been visited by private investigators or people that had claimed to be private investigators, and kind of encouraging to drop certain cases. And I think with the Jay-Z thing, the one case did end up getting dropped. I think some people, it can be so easy to put the fear in them, especially if they have kids and like a family and, you know, all this other stuff going on. The kind of threats and intimidation that they can use. And when you have that much access to that much money, you know, you have billions of dollars, like, some of these people are really, really wealthy. So, you know, what's the price? You know, does that, like, most people have a price that they can be paid off and bought to flip their script or to drop a case. So just because they've dropped the case, though, and settled, doesn't mean that they're not guilty. You know, it just means that it's not going to end up going to trial. So it's going to be really interesting to see the way this all goes down. And yeah, I'm going to be on top of this for, you know, the next, whatever next thing comes up. I'm going to have to double check the dates and everything, but I do want to stay on top of this and stay covering it. Today was a little weird, but, and like, there's not much going on. Like, it's just the jury selection, so there's not really too much to report. But it is good to stay aware and to stay on top of it and not let it just get covered up and disappeared into the nether like so many other similar cases, you know.
What we already know, we've gotten hints of from Diddy's defense during these many pretrial hearings over the recent months, and that is he's going to say, listen, you may not like his lifestyle. It was a swinger lifestyle was the term that was used by his defense team, and you may not agree with it, but this was not a crime. This was not sex trafficking. This was basically these freak-offs were the swinger lifestyle, but people will have to talk about that because a key component, Andy, as you know, we've talked about this before, one of the key components in proving his innocence or getting a not guilty verdict from that jury is them proving that these were consensual sex acts and not that the participants, male and female, were not forced or coerced into them. So a lot was coming out, but you talk about lists and talk about questions. There was also a list of 100 names and places that the judge asked the jurors to put a yes or no. Yes, if they knew that person or had heard of them, or no. And some of the names on that were kind of eye-popping, like Kanye West, Mike Myers, and then some of the other personalities that we've seen, some of the other names that have come up in the court, and then some of these other places too. So it was interesting to see what people were saying about that as well, Andy. But the judge is being very, very thorough. He's doing all of the questioning at this point, and then he asked the prosecution and the defense if they have any questions. If they have questions, they write them down, they show them to each other, and then they give them to the judge, and then the judge asks the question of the potential juror. And I think all of this is done to be less confusing and more comfortable for these jurors, so that they don't feel like they have people from every direction, you know, asking them these sometimes very sensitive questions, Andy.
Yeah, it's so very interesting. And you mentioned some of the high-profile names, like you mentioned Kanye West, Mike Myers, Michael B. Jordan, because this case is about Sean Diddy Combs, but also those names might have influence on a juror. I do want to ask you about the social media aspect, because that's the technology, the media age that we live in. And some of these jurors were questions about some of the posts they even like, something as simple as that. How might that be a factor in how they decide this jury?
Well, that can definitely be a factor because one of the things they guarded against and that they've talked about in the some of the pretrial hearings is this social media factor, this ability of the jurors. You can be sure, according to what the legal experts that I've been interviewing throughout this process are telling me, you can be sure that Diddy's defense team, whatever names were on that are on their jury list, that they're getting in the names of these jurors. Which, by the way, the court was open to the public. It was open to limited media, but the jurors' names were not read in open court. So their names will not be on the official record. They're being known by a certain number, like juror number 62 or juror number 110 or whatever that happened to be. But this social media, you can bet, the legal experts say, you can bet that his team was looking up all these people to see, do they have a LinkedIn? Do they have an Instagram? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Facebook? And also, are they part of any of these, these groups, like a Facebook group on a particular cause? They want to know their politics. They want to know their views. And I think that was very telling. But in terms of the courtroom itself, this courthouse in particular is probably definitely in the New York area, the most difficult and the strictest in terms of electronic devices. No one except for lawyers with a special permit and of course the prosecutors are allowed to have cell phones in the courtroom at all. We're not even allowed to bring it in the building. This morning I went in through the doors you see right behind me, went through a screening, like a very thorough type of airport screening. I put my phone, I put my AirPods, I put my my Apple Watch in a plastic Ziploc bag because that had to be checked as I went upstairs into the into the room.
Yeah, so that's the other thing too, is like a lot of these people, there's not really much stopping them from speaking on what they've seen, what they witnessed, what went down. Even just for some of the jury members that didn't end up getting accepted, there's not really much stopping them from talking about it on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever, right? Like, we do live in a very social media aware world, everybody's kind of, like I was saying earlier, the independent journalism, which on one hand it is so important, but if it's going to risk this being considered like a mistrial and preventing justice being served in ways just because people can't not talk about it, because if there were 100 names, of 100 names they're just mentioning those 3, but if there was 100 different names, there could be a lot of speculation regarding what part they might be playing in the trial, and then whether or not they end up being on the jury itself and sequestered and so on and so forth. Some of that information still may find its way into the public, and I'm just wondering, if that's going to end up being something that's going to be a detriment to the case, or if it's going to be a support of the case. You know what I mean? Like, because obviously people are going to talk about it and people are going to report on it. And this is bigger than the OJ trial. Like, this is way bigger. This is like the case of the trial of the century. I think this will probably be the most it's going to gain the most attention of all, because a lot of people, like, across generations too, like, everybody knows who Diddy is, and or people that he had worked with or done music with over the years, and because he has been such a, on the forefront for so long, and, like, when you consider, like, with Usher and just, like, Will Smith and all these people, Kanye, Jay-Z, all these people, like, about them. Everybody knows about them, whether you're 30 now or 40, 50, 60, even younger people are familiar with these people, and whether or not they grew up with them or not, like, there's a lot of familiarity there. Like, maybe you don't know, like I was saying earlier, you don't know their music, or you're not familiar with, as much of their personal life, but you've at least heard those names, and some people, they get starstruck too. Like, some people can't handle being around famous people and being able to look at it objectively, like, automatically, just that the fame and the fortune and all these things, like all the glitz and glam and whatever, some people are so blinded by that too, right? So it's going to be really hard to find the right people that are not going to be biased, that are going to be able to look at it objectively, because on one hand, maybe they're cool with the Diddy situation, and that's not going to be, they're not going to, have a bias on that. There's not going to be the impact on that. But when you consider these 100 or so other names, especially when it comes to, like, sports fans and stuff, you know, some people just, they're the fandom of it all, the fanatics just don't want to believe that the people that they look up to could be doing such atrocious things, you know, in spite of all the evidence, in spite of so many statements and so much information. Like, it's hard to find people that are not going to have a bias whatsoever, whether they're a fan of that specific person or not. You know, like, a lot of people are very, yeah, they become blinded. Exactly, Beatrice. They get blinded to the reality of it. And, like, this is how these kind of people have been getting away with this for so long, too, you know, because there's that star factor, you know, and then if there's money involved, if they're paid off or whatever, and it's like, it's just... It's going to be complicated. It's going to be so much more complicated than, say, the OJ trial. And even maybe the Epstein trial, because these are more people that people actually are familiar with, where with some of the people in the Epstein trial, you know, they're royalty or they're like political figures or there's certain powerful individuals, but some of them aren't necessarily as in the forefront of the social sphere as people like Diddy or Jay-Z, right? Like, it's I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all goes down because it is so much more complicated. There's so many more layers, and then having that star power behind it all. A lot of people, you know, they worship exactly the idolatry. They worship the idols, regardless of what they do, right? But you know, like, and even with the R. Kelly thing, eventually justice was served in that case, but he was dropping hit singles while some of these court proceedings were happening, and he got off on the first round, you know, and then it took a second round of going through the courts for him to finally end up going to jail for it, but, and, like, with what they found, he had child SA material, and, you know, there was so much more to that than what people realized, but, like, he had hit singles while it was all going down, too, and so it's, like, you really got to think of whether or not in that first round of the trial, the first, proceedings, like, if that had impacted that, you know, and if that's going to be the case with this, you know, because there are so many other tactics that can be used to distract and to deflect and all the smoke and mirrors, and it's just, I don't know if it's even possible fully for it to be you know, what's the word, like a clean case, I guess you could say. Like, there's going to be some stuff that's just going to be impacting it one way or the other that they're not going to have any control over, no matter how much they try to control. And with this certain jury selection and keeping things quiet, you know, like, because it's a federal case, so they can't broadcast it in such a way. I don't know. It's going to be hard to say if it's going to be a fair trial one way or the other. And for the victims mainly, like, we want to know that they're going to be able to have justice served for them, right? But how can it be done with fairness with this kind of star power, you know? Okay, I'm just going to read this update here. So the court ended at 5:30. More than half a dozen of the jurors were disqualified by the end of the session for reasons that are varied, being SA survivors or having someone close to them who was an SA survivor, anyone related to law enforcement, or people who have had encounters with the criminal justice system, among others. Several jurors were also disqualified for a lack of proficiency in English. Jurors were also asked if they would be disturbed talking about SA or just sexual acts with other jurors as they deliberate on a verdict, because there is that too, obviously. Like, some people are just, they're not even comfortable talking about the act itself, let alone it being forced or involving people and things that cannot consent, you know. So there's a lot of variables. There's a lot more variables here. And it's not just one crime, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like with the OJ thing, obviously it was like the one main crime that they were focusing on to try to prove whether he was guilty or not or whatever, which I think some people still debate whether or not that the outcome of that trial was the right thing, you know, but at least with that, like, there was the one overall crime that they were trying to prove one way or the other, where with this, it's like, there's just so much going on. There's so much going on. And yeah, like adults getting freaky amongst each other is not a crime, obviously, but where do you draw the line of it being a consensual act, even as an adult, when it seems that, people were being unwillingly put under the influence, like some people are thinking they're just having a drink and having a nice time that way, but if they were given substances against their will and had done things that they wouldn't have otherwise done, not being under the influence that way, would we consider that a crime? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I would say that in those cases, even if they were legal adults, but they weren't there, in their right minds to be making a decision. Obviously, like, there's something wrong there. But the way people view, there's a lot of people that just aren't comfortable talking about sex in general, let alone talking about the various, different acts that can be taking place that between consenting adults versus,
into the room where the jury was being screened in the courtroom. So they're very tight on that. So a lot of they're trying to kind of damp down the, the hysteria that's been around this trial in the social media phase. I mean, I was taking notes. I took pages and pages of notes in a reporter's notebook instead of on my phone, which is what I would normally be doing. And, they're paying very close attention to that because the other thing they want to avoid, Andy, is they want to avoid anybody that's looking at this trial as sort of a come up, as a way for themselves to get famous, as a way to have an experience that they can write a book about and get famous and make some money themselves. So they're being probably as thorough, if not more thorough, than any of the other big high profile cases that we've seen here. Andy?
That is a very good point, and something that I did want to bring up, because not only is this case about Diddy Combs, but it's also about potentially the jury, and they have to decipher what their background is, their perspective on this case, but also the fact that they are going to be unbiased both ways. My last question, Lisa, before I let you go, I know this is just really day one of jury selection, but opening statements expected to begin in exactly a week's time. Are we still on a pace for that?
Yes, we are, Andy, because this judge, I have to tell you, he's extremely fair, and he goes above and beyond what I've seen a lot of other judges do in terms of explaining the process, explaining what's going on. And he said last week at the pretrial conference that he wanted to try to get this final jury list done by Wednesday night, which they may do. They may get there closely, but definitely by the end of the week. His reasoning was, he said, I want to give the defense team as well as prosecutors a couple of days, a long weekend in order to prepare for those opening statements on Monday, which are going to be so very, very important. So he's on track. He's been very good about the clock. He denied Diddy wanted to start the trial a lot later than, get an extension on it. The judge denied that request. He said this is a train and it's moving right down the track to May 5th today and to May 12th with those opening statements. So I think that they're going to stay on track for that. If not, we'll let you know right away. But that's the way it looks. And so far, everything that this judge has said in terms of scheduling is what's happening. Andy?
It is moving forward as scheduled. Day number one, jury selection underway. Lisa Evers, great perspective, great insight there to be a fly on the wall like you were. So very interesting. Thanks again for your reporting here on Live Now from Fox.
All right. Thank you very much, Andy.
All right, thank you so much. Great conversation there with Lisa Evers, one of the best covering this Diddy trial that begins jury selection underway in a rainy New York. You're looking there at Manhattan here, just about 6:30 on the East Coast. I'm Andy Mack. Let's slide away for a quick 2-minute break. More top headlines after this.
I'm just going to see if there's any other updates here, but yeah, the Met Gala thing's kind of overshadowing to an extent. It's well underway, and they've got like, I don't know, what was it, like 500,000 people watching that when I scrolled past it. So I'm hoping that doesn't mean that people get distracted or, you know, aren't going to be too caught up in that. You know, I wonder if the timing was not great because of that. The timing of the Met Gala and everything coming down, because things like that can be a distraction as well, right? Let me just see. Yeah, 700, almost 800,000 people watching the Met Gala with Vogue or whatever right now, which is kind of insane to think, like, and to think that they're all there just celebrating and having a nice time with all this other stuff going on. It's like, it takes a certain kind of person, I feel like, to be, you know, so disconnected from what's going on in the whole sphere of it all, you know. Let me see. There's a lot of just like people staking out outside. But I think for what we were waiting for, that was kind of the main thing, is just getting the reports of what was going on in the courtroom today, what the final conclusion for the day was, which I think we've kind of we've got that, and then the next thing will be on May 12th, so next week. So definitely I think there'll be a little more information coming down the line then. But let me just see here if we can get some other folks weighing in on the situation here. I guess they're still kind of holding out to see if some of the attorneys are going to come out and make statements, because that would really be the only thing left at this point. But I do want to see, like I said, if there was any other updates from people that were inside the room that might add more to it. But like I said, it was a pretty simplistic situation today, and if mainly their main focus was just the jury selection, then there's really not too much more to it, I don't think. So you can see this update they did.
Those stories in just a moment. But first, here's a live look outside right now. Let's bring in Liv Johnson for a first look at the forecast. Pretty gloomy out there, Liv.
Yes, very gloomy. We have fog, we have drizzle, we have rain in some areas. Not coming down too heavy right now in this city, but we could still see some stronger storms as we get into the later afternoon and the evening. And we're still dealing with some visibility issues we have since earlier this morning. Those low-hanging clouds and some fog, so be careful out there. It's just a rain video of
expect.
Bianca, as many as 150 potential jurors are being questioned today. Some said that they have heard about the allegations. One woman said that she saw the video of Diddy assaulting Cassie Ventura. And another woman said that she heard a comedian make a joke about all of the baby oil bottles found inside Diddy's house. Now, Diddy walked into courtroom today and he hugged all of his attorneys. He was also seen in casual clothing, different from his usual prison uniform. He wore a sweater with a white collared shirt underneath and gray slacks. The jury will be anonymous, and this is often the case in high-profile trials to protect jurors from harassment. The trial is expected to last around 2 months, and we can also expect prosecutors to argue that Diddy used his power to force women to participate in drug-fueled orgies that lasted days, also known as freak-offs. Diddy's defense team says everything was consensual, and his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said during a hearing last month that there's nothing criminal about a swinger's lifestyle. One of the 4 alleged victims expected to testify include R&B singer and ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. The judge also said that he wants to take 3 days to seat a panel of 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Now, opening statements are set for Monday, and Diddy is facing life in prison if convicted. We're live outside federal court in Lower Manhattan. Michelle Ross, Fox 5 News.
All right, Michelle, thank you for that. All right, let's take a live look at Newark Airport right now. That's where travelers are dealing with increasing delays and all those cancellations. There are several contributing factors as of right now. Some flights were impacted by temporary ground stop.
I guess it's just kind of mixing in the different news segments because there's other stuff going on at once. They're kind of switched it up.
Asking the court to halt.
They do news now. Oops.
Of HHS.
And illegal. Take a look.
We are asking the court to halt the unlawful dismantling of HHS, to stop the mass firings.
Federal.
One place.
Turning heads of clothing and throughout the.
Create what you wanted for yourself and how you want it.
$31 million for the museum. And it's the end of an era.
Yeah, that might be pretty much it. Like I said, there wasn't too much going on today. All right, here's another little update.
Bianca, as many as 150 potential jurors are being questioned today.
And it's just like a repeat. Yeah, so maybe put together a little video of everything that happened today. And just summarize everything. Because I think that was pretty much it. But yeah, come Monday, upcoming Monday on the 12th, I think there'll be a lot more going on to be able to report on. But obviously, it is such a high-profile case. We want to stay on top of it. Yeah, I kind of wonder if maybe Justin Bieber is going to end up being a witness, or if he's filed one of the lawsuits. Who really knows? You know, that's something that's like, I think for his own safety and protection, like they'd want to keep it under wraps because he is kind of going against some pretty high-profile people, and especially with the last few months, been going on with him. He's already been struggling. And kind of going up against his own management and trying to detach himself from certain businesses that had been created with certain people. And, you know, I think it's whether he is involved or not, I think all of it is going to be an impact to his mental health. So I think we really need to keep him in our thoughts, you know, and send as much positive energy as we can his way. Because I think we are seeing a lot of similarities with what's going on with Justin Bieber as to what was going on with Aaron Carter near the end of his life, you know, and it just seemed like it was like a spiral out of control and substance abuse and this, that, and the other thing. And it's really easy to demonize and punish people for the outcome of their trauma, you know, so I think we really got to keep an eye on that and just not let the official narrative skew what we know to be true here, you know, and what we know to be really going on, like, because obviously he is struggling and trying to self-soothe and self-medicate, and I guess he had stopped a lot of the medications he'd been prescribed, which has been a cause for concern. But if he is trying to get a clarity of mind and they've just kind of been keeping him medicated and keeping him complicit and docile all these years, you know, he might be trying to really just get, you know, separate himself from that and get a clarity of mind overall. And then if he is using other substances, like, it could obviously conflict. So it is a dangerous situation, and we should be concerned for him and not be making a spectacle out of it as the way that we so often have in the past, you know, the way that the media has sensationalized and glorified different celebrity meltdowns. I think that we have a better understanding now. I think we're a lot more trauma informed. And so we need to keep that energy, you know, and be supportive and not be contributing to people that are mocking him and making fun of him right now, because it's been awful, some of the stuff I've seen that people are saying, and it's It's just not okay. But yeah, so I guess we'll maybe just leave it at that, because I don't think there's really, like I said, much more to cover. And like I said, I'll maybe do a little summary video from today, with what we do know, what had happened, what the outcome was. I think they were hoping though that the attorneys would come out and make some statements. I guess we can maybe stick around for another little while here. I guess that's still possible. That is why they're all still kind of hanging around and still streaming here on some of these some of the news segments. They ended it and they left the location or whatever, but some are still hanging out because I think there is that possibility. So yeah, we'll hang out for a little bit longer here, but like I said, I think it's not going to be much more new news to cover. It's going to be just maybe like more of a reiteration of kind of what we've heard so far. Yeah, of course, guys. No worries. We'll be on top of it a little earlier in the day on the 12th. Try to start at noon. But it's hard because I do a lot of I work at night better, you know, like a lot of what I'm doing is nighttime. Kind of a night owl that way, so trying to swing it. We'll see how early we're able to get it going. But yeah, I think we definitely just want to keep our eyes on it though, and keep our eyes wide open when it comes to different things coming out about the case and things being reported. Just not let us be skewed or distracted. Yeah, I'm kind of doubting they're going to have too much to say after today, because I guess it is still kind of up in the air too. Like, it was mainly just for the jury selection for today, and they're not going to know for sure really until closer to the end of the week. But I mean, it is possible. They do got to leave at some point, and so it is possible they'll make a statement. But who knows? Who knows? They might not, because like I said, there's not really too much going on for today.
That's stuff day one. Come on now. It's on the road.
Well, it's not that simple, you know, like, and this is why we've seen a lot of newscasters, head reporters going off and just kind of doing their own thing, because it's all beyond their control, you know. Most of the whole time it was like somebody else is deciding for them what they're reporting on and what they're allowed to say and how they're allowed to say it. Just because they were the lead newscast on a station doesn't mean they really have a say. But, you know, the floodgates are opening, and now, you know, they can't not talk about it. It's, you know, it's all coming down the line now. So luckily now more things are being spoken about more openly. But I don't think that they've really had any control, you know. And I think now that there's more independent journalism happening, it's sort of forcing them to be a little more accountable and forcing them to pay a little more attention and be reporting on the truth of the matters, you know.
Federal racketeering and sex trafficking case against Sean Diddy Combs is underway. So here's what's happening right now. Jury selection started earlier this morning. The hip-hop artist faces 5 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Combs pleaded not guilty, but faces decades in prison. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Jerika Duncan. Jerika, first of all, good to see you, even though you're having to be under an umbrella there, my friend.
Great to see you, Reed.
We understand that you have an update on what happened in court. Tell me about that.
That's right. It appears that at least 2 of those jurors have been seated. I just left court about 15 minutes ago, and they are still questioning jurors. Remember, they need 12 that they will seat and 6 alternates for this federal case against Sean Diddy Combs. And just to give you a sense of some of the questions that the jurors were asked before they were questioned by the judge and also prosecutors as well as the defense team, if they had any issues with sexual assault, if they had any experience with it, their views from the prosecution on law enforcement. They were asked if they received any training or had any experience with psychiatry, psychology, addiction, law enforcement. They also asked about any questions or reservations they had about artists and the hip-hop community, witnesses that will testify under immunity. So this is just a few of the questions that sort of give us a look into what each side is looking for when it comes to that impartiality of a juror. And many times over, the judge mentioned that Sean Diddy Combs is presumed innocent unless he is found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He mentioned that over and over again to each juror that was questioned. Last check, though, about 9 jurors had been questioned, 2 that we know that were seated, in which the prosecution and the defense agreed they were comfortable with seating those jurors. So a lot to learn throughout the next couple of days, which is how long the judge said this should last. They're hoping to get through about 50 jurors each day. But both sides recognize how difficult this case will be in terms of getting that right jury pool to make sure that folks don't come in here with preconceived ideas because of that video that went viral that we saw of what appears to be Sean Combs kicking and dragging his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. But this really comes down to a federal case, the U.S. government, United States government against Sean Combs, facing sex trafficking and racketeering charges, which could get him up to life in prison if he's convicted on all charges.
Well, Jerika, if I'm in that courtroom, I have a huge question in my mind, whether I'm with a prosecution or defense, and that is, how can I seat a jury in a case against one of the most famous men on the planet, and especially now infamous, made more infamous by that video you talked about? It's a challenge.
It really is, Reed, and I think that's why even with the questionnaires that these jurors filled out, it was an opportunity for both sides to ask questions to those jurors based on how they filled out that questionnaire. There were some other telling moments in what we are now learning about some of the people and places, for instance, that jurors were asked about if they were familiar with. For instance, one juror said that they were familiar with, I believe it wasn't, stand by because it is wet outside and I want to make sure I get it right. It was number 88, and that was apparently Michael B. Jordan. And then there was number 117, Mike Myers. So these were jurors saying that they were familiar with pictures of these people, but just knowing them as actors or celebrities. Then there were parts where the judge said, what about number 133? You had a question about that person. And this was juror number 4. They said, I know them as a celebrity, but in that case, the judge didn't mention them by name. And just as I was leaving, another juror was asked about Kanye West in terms of what that juror knew about Kanye West or their feelings or thoughts about him. So we don't know how that will play into this trial, whether this is a situation where maybe one of the witnesses or alleged victims says they saw people at a party, or whether these were just people that were at a Diddy party that we've talked about along with this case. So it's too early to presume exactly what that means, but there are a number of locations and people that these jurors were already shown to find out their connection to or just how familiar they are with some of these people and places.
All right, Jerika Duncan, CBS News. Always great to talk to you, my friend. Let's hope the rain lets up for the Met Gala that's happening in...
And of course, though, the Met Gala, everybody's concerned about the Met Gala. And it's almost at like a million viewers, so definitely a lot more attention going on with that than there is with the trial here. So I'm wondering if it was some kind of a strategic choice in having it on the same day as the Met Gala, knowing that a lot of people are going to be distracted and looking at that and paying more attention to that than this case, but again, it kind of just shows, though, like, it's obviously they're told what to talk about, they're told what they need to focus on too, so I wouldn't really hold it against that reporter per se, but yeah, it just shows like how easy it is to distract the masses when it comes to things like this, and I'm kind of wondering like who decided on the day, and if it was strategic one way or the other, what they were kind of intending with that, because obviously it does impact it to such an extent, Naomi Campbell was banned from the Met Gala. Interesting. Yeah, she's been getting in all sorts of trouble. She got barred from being part of any charitable foundations too, not long ago, due to some misappropriated funds. So there's a lot going on with some of these different people that may or may not be involved in this case. They have some of their own legal troubles going on too. Yeah, it's really really easy to distract people, that's for sure. And it's just too bad that people are still more focused on the glitz and glam of it all than versus the reality, like this is more the reality of what goes on behind the scenes, but people want to just see them out dressed up and doing their due, Yeah, it's almost at 900,000 people watching on the Vogue channel right now. It's so like surreal almost to see like all these people can be out celebrating icons in such a way while this is all going on, it's I don't know, like I don't know how you can be so disconnected from it and be so focused on the wrong things, like it's just right when you think you've got some hope in humanity with some stuff coming down the line, you're kind of reminded where everyone's focus is still going to be mainly, no matter what you do, no matter what's going on. Everybody knows when the Met Gala is coming up, but I guess not so many people knew that today would be the hearing too, and again it was overshadowed likely. Yeah, well, I guess anything that's going to be, like, bringing the focus back over, like, they want to keep the Met Gala people focused on the Met Gala and not considering what's going on over here, kind of seems to me. Yeah, well, it makes you wonder, too, how much is all theater. How much we're presented is, a strategic staged thing versus reality, you know. But I guess it just shows too, though, like that how many people are just easily distracted, how many people are, you know, I don't know. It's a little bit disturbing to see, because you could see like how many people were watching with this earlier, you know, and it was still pretty decent, a decent crowd, I guess, coming out to watch and see what was going on with the Diddy trial. But in comparison, it's like a tenth of what the Met Gala is getting attention, you know. So I don't know what to think about it. I guess it can't be going on forever, though, and this is going to be for the next couple months. This is what's going to be happening. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what other things they try to come out with to serve as a distraction, you know. Because things are going to start heating up as it all continues. And then I guess, yeah, once the jury's seated and decided upon and things start getting underway, it's anybody's guess, you know, how much it's going to be reported, how much it's going to be allowed to be made public. Yeah, I agree, Bobby. I can't see it being only a 2-month thing, especially just for how difficult it is to find the jurors, let alone, you know. So I think we might see it continuing through the summer, you know, until probably carry us into the fall almost, I would think, for how complex it is. It's like, there's no way that, I just don't think that they can wrap it up that quick. And especially when the dates are spaced out too, like this is today and then there's next week, and you know, depending on any other delays or things that might come up in between, because I think probably the defense team's going to be trying to delay and distract and just drag it out as long as they can too, so then, you know, certain key elements will be forgotten, you know, like the more they drag it out, the less they're going to be able to retain all of the information that the jury is taking in, you know. It'll have to be a jury of 80-year-olds from convalescent home, yeah. Well, it's like, yeah, like, you got to think of, like, the jury pool of how limited it really is. And then, you know, the difference in understanding of society right now, too. Like, if they don't know about any of these things, like, how much are they going to be able to judge realistically overall, you know? Because, like they were saying, too, people might be getting more distracted about the various sex acts and things that were going on, and be so floored just by that when it comes to the more important details, they may be distracted just on that aspect. Yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that's pretty much it for today. I don't think any of the attorneys are coming out. And I think they probably got to stick around too for whatever is happening that's behind the scenes too, you know, and conferring with Diddy and each other. And I think there's probably still a lot more going on, but just that they wouldn't want the public to have access to. So they'll probably be waiting there a while, if they are waiting for the attorneys to come out, because I think there's so much more going on too that they gotta sort out ahead of the 12th. So yeah, maybe we'll just leave it at that for now, and I'll put like an update video together with just the highlights of today, and a summary. And yeah, we'll be back on this on Monday. And I guess it'll just be interesting to see what comes out in between now and then. We'll try to keep an eye on that too. But it's hard to know what to even be paying attention to, too, like, because obviously this is important, but, like, the whole situation with the Virginia, it seems like that has gotten awfully quiet really quick, too, so I maybe got to do a little update on that as well. But, yeah, so, yeah, I guess you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Keep your eyes open. Just keep paying attention to what is important here, and don't let them distract. But yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll call it. But thanks for coming out, guys, and thank you for paying attention here. Yeah, just not really sure what to think about how this is gonna go, you know. Just trying to think if I've got any other parting statements to make. But yeah, again, there's just really not too much going on for today, so. But yeah, let's not let this overshadow that either, you know. Because obviously that things are heating up on all sides, and it definitely sounds like that might be playing a little bit of a part in this as well. Some of the overlaps of some of the names. So yeah, everybody take care of yourselves. Just I guess do your own research too. It's always important to be doing some of your own investigating in these matters. But yeah, with that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll catch you on the flip side.